Hello, hello. Welcome, everyone. My name is Anisa Aven, and I am the CEO and founder of Turnkey Coaching Solutions and one of the managing partners over at Lean DEI. Our conversation today is about how AI can help you with your DEI, your diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. So, a little bit of background about Lean DEI. Lean DEI combines next gen artificial intelligence with high touch people development to deliver what we call a right size solution for building an inclusive culture. So, a little bit about us and our management team. My name again is Anisa Aven, and as I mentioned, I am the founder over at Turnkey Coaching and Development Solutions. Turnkey is an enterprise coaching, training, and management consulting firm, and we provide outsourced learning solutions to enterprises that are looking to create more sustainable learning and development initiatives through a single point of contact. We have over 1,000 coaches and trainers all across the US and key hubs globally. So I'm proud to say, though, that one of the most significant initiatives that we've joined forces with over this last year is, in fact, Lean DEI. So I'm going to turn it over to Swetha. Would you introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Thanks, Anisa. Hi, everyone. Welcome. And we're so excited to get a chance to talk to you about this topic. As Anisa mentioned, this is an area that I'm very passionate about. So I created Organalytics about 5 years ago as a way to measure DEI and measure inclusion specifically. So we use machine learning and network analytics to really help companies understand how inclusive their team is, but also where the people are within the periphery or who the key players are. So we'll talk a lot more about our solution, but this is why I'm passionate about it. I'm really interested to hear from you guys about DEI efforts and what you guys have seen in the field, if you will. So looking forward to this. Vivek?
Cool. Thanks, Vita. Hey everyone, my name is Vivek. I'm the CEO of Weave. At Weave, we help people leaders to build happy and high-performing teams. In my previous life, I was a consultant for Fortune 100 companies. My job was jumping from company to company of different industries, of different sizes. And in delivering those projects, I started to see a trend, which was this growing disconnect between employees and leaders. For a multitude of reasons, there's obviously faster paces of work, new technology, most recently, a massive shift to remote work and flex work. But regardless, the question became, how do we build strong employee-leader relationships no matter where we are? At Weave, we use conversational AI and natural language processing to solve that question. That aspect of what we do is what ties together the Lean DEI framework that you're going to hear more about today.
Beautiful. So a little bit of background about just, what we're doing, what we're up to. Some of our clients are large multinational organizations, as you can see on the screen, but we also work with mid-sized organizations. And with our diversity and equity inclusion experts, we can also accommodate the smaller startups or smaller organization support. We include that just as a means of letting you know we kind of know our stuff with more than a combined 40 plus years of experience with our experts on staff. There isn't a single diversity, equity, or inclusion initiative, strategy, or best practice that we are not familiar with, including how to use AI in order to support your workforce and your employee initiatives. So having said that, one of the key things that we're kind of excited to offer you guys is initially we would have these conversations where folks just needed to know, where are we? We think we're doing pretty good, but what are other folks doing? How do we measure up? So that they can, Swetha and their teams, put together this benchmark. So if you will head on over to leandei.com/DEI benchmark, you'll fill out a quiz and you'll answer these questions and you'll be able to rate yourself related to how well are we doing with each of the pillars that are important for DEI initiatives. And a little bit later on, we're also going to talk a little bit about how you can leverage that to support your strategy and your next steps, but also how we've put together a little bit of a support team, I should call it, an accelerator program to support organizations in designing their strategy, their guiding principles, or a single one-off initiative using peer support. So we'll get into that a little bit more later. So high level, we want to make sure this is meaningful and relevant to you. So if you've joined us, thank you for your time. Don't let us get away with not making this targeted and really relevant for you. So interrupt us at any time, ask your questions at any time. If we don't know the answer, I promise you we'll get back to you with an expert. But here's what we're going to talk about today. We're need to do a little bit of what's the DEI landscape, what's happening, where are we, where do we need to go. We're going to talk about the elephant in the room. Everyone here knows what that is, the difficulty around healthy DEI conversations and implementing initiatives that are all inclusive. And we're going to talk about building a right-size solution specifically by leveraging cutting edge technology. We're going to talk a little bit about why it's important for an organization to identify the unconscious biases, how to engage your employees, and finally, how to solve with the right size solution for inclusion.
So I'll kick it off here. As we all know, the world is changing. Our choices are to try and keep up with that change, to get run over by it, or we can actually drive the change that's happening in the world. So at this point, everyone knows the stats. We all know that inclusive organizations tend to be more innovative, they have higher returns, they have lower turnover, they capture more market share than their less diverse peers. But still, we see that D&I issues tend to be challenging for most companies. In about 5 minutes of Googling, we're able to pull up a bunch of headlines showing that there are issues with age discrimination, lawsuits from women in pursuit of the C-suite. Very famously, Starbucks in 2018 had a very public issue where a manager called the police on 2 Black customers who were then arrested within 10 minutes of them just sitting there drinking coffee. In response, Starbucks very publicly shut down all 8,000 of their stores to do trainings. But then you fast forward a couple of years and they're banning employees from wearing BLM attire. The lesson here is that companies are often being very reactive, despite taking diversity, equity, inclusion issues very seriously, pouring impressive amounts of resources and money and time into unconscious bias trainings and other initiatives. Culture itself is slow to change because of the reactive nature. So if we see that companies are aware of the benefits of being inclusive and diverse, and more importantly, they're well aware of the costs of not doing so, what's the gap? What are we currently missing? For that, I'm going to hand it over to Shweta.
Yeah, so I've worked in a lot of large companies and we've seen a lot of D&I initiatives. And here's the common trends that we've seen across a lot of these D&I initiatives and programs that companies put together. First of all, a lot of times they tend to be one-off piecemeal programs that, as Vivek was saying, are very reactive. They are reacting to something that happened out in the media or something that happened more particularly to the company. It's one-off. But on top of that, it also tends to be very top-down and overly centralized. What we mean by that is there's a DEI council or there's some kind of a steering group or a steering committee that's very centralized, but very little on the actual ground for operational leaders. So it tends to be, because of the way that they're generally organized, they're also broad and generic, and the people on the ground who actually need the support, they don't have the support because it's all sitting up in corporate. There's also no measurable ROI, which prevents long-term investment because you really can't show what the long-term impact is. So that's one of the big hindrances, is that people are throwing money in it, but they don't know. It feels like a black box. So they'll put some money there, but they don't know if they should put how much they should put, or if it's actually having any impact that they can discern at all. So, and on top of that, to make matters kind of even more cloudy, not all discrimination or not all of these issues are very obvious. These can be very, very slight. It can be a very small thing can have big impacts. And on top of that, these solutions, because of how nebulous these areas of discrimination or feeling of not feeling included are, the solutions aren't necessarily effective because they're not tied to what is actually driving the feeling of not being included and the feeling of discriminated against. So that is really one of the big challenges that we face when we're designing any of these programs.
Very good. So what does this mean for our programs? It means that we have to be aware that resistance is predictable, that we're not going to get everything right. Training can be divisive and often is, especially when some of the trainers approach this from a personal pathology of one group against another, or as opposed to a systemic issue. Coaching is really effective, but how do you do that at scale, right? It's expensive and unpredictable and doesn't always tie to the greater goals. Awareness fails to inspire diversity appreciation. Just because an individual is aware that there's an issue doesn't mean that they understand how they can be an ally, how they need to look at their own internal biases, etc. So diversity policies even can be disruptive. There's so much that feeds into an effective program that we cannot put our finger on because it's emotional, because it's inherent and innate in who we have, how we've been raised, for example. So we're at a tipping point though. What we know is that systemic racism combined with social injustice and structural discrimination and polarized views and microaggressions. Wow, what an eye opener it was when I learned that word, right? All of this together with implicit bias and call out culture and the sense that when we talk about prejudice or biases, we are in fact marginalizing a majority group, for example. What we've had in our organizations is an organizational crisis where on one side our employment law specialists are saying, don't touch that. All we're doing is opening up ourselves for litigation. And on the other side, we have a mass exodus. If the organization is not going to support, for example, Black Lives Matter, we're out of here and we're going to tell everybody on social media. But it doesn't have to be those polar opposites. We can find an appropriate way to create culture change. And that's what we want to talk about. Starts with extinguishing the fuse of resistance, right? We have to acknowledge that part of the problem is because this conversation feels like it's a threat to our social identity for particularly our majority groups. What we want to focus on instead is progress made, the value of diversity, how impactful it can be for our organization's success when we honor the diversity, respect cultural differences, and in fact, make it a part of our strategy. We want to eliminate any possibility of public shaming. There's just no place for it if what we really want is to produce results, is to create a culture shift, is to create an equitable culture inside our organization. There has to be a safe place for education and growth and differences of opinions while still maintaining there are certain values and guiding principles that are non-negotiable, right? We want to look at the behaviors of inclusion versus eliminating all exclusion, right? We want to look at the benefits of equality for all. We want to train our leaders and managers to listen to the emotional, social, and environmental, I could keep on going, of each and every employee, if in fact what we want is buy-in from the ground up and the top down. One final piece is historical injustices. It is impossible to have an effective program without having some education, without fostering awareness around our history, our collective history. But at the same time, too much focus, and we go back to majority groups feeling threatened, and without the majority groups buy-in and support for the culture change, for the adoption of equitable principles and policies, you risk having the program implode on itself. And that, in fact, is the elephant in the room. So a dominant focus on historical injustices calls majority groups to resist, deny, and withdraw support. It's not like our majority groups are going to do that. I almost said our, which is, I'm one of those, right? So it's not like this happens overtly. It's not like we claim, I'm not going to participate. It just happens silently. When that happens, we then risk the majority groups feeling exhausted and like just one more piece of evidence that nothing is ever going to change. Increasing defensiveness, derailing programs, and creating more opportunities for litigation. That's why the approach has to be measured, and where we can use technology to help us do this in a very systematic, process-oriented, but attentive to the well-being of our teams kind of methodology. So Lean DEI is an end-to-end solution for building an inclusive workplace over time. The goal is to enable diverse hiring, team building, and decision making at all levels of your organization, thereby walking the talk of inclusion and using artificial intelligence to make it possible. 3 steps of it: identify, engage, and solve. And whether you use our technology or not, whether you leverage technology or just do this manually, you're going to need and want to go through 3 very important phases. First, you want to identify. In our methodology, we use Swetha's technology called organizational network analysis to identify unconscious biases, the employees who are impacted, and the key people leaders who can make a difference, those champions of change who are already on the ground doing the work, but who may not be leveraged to their full capacity. Second piece is engage. Kim, our empathetic AI chatbot, is an always available resource for employees to voice their needs. Using artificial intelligence and conversational intelligence, she intelligently deep dives into actionable issues and educates employees while escalating those issues to people leaders. Finally, we want to solve. Throwing just any training program across all organizations is a check the box solution that isn't going to create culture change. It may be a start, so I don't want to discourage that, but what if we could target just the groups inside of an organization that need support? Well, that's where Solve comes in, right? We want people leaders to have access to expert D&I consultants for education, training, coaching, strategy support, enabling your managers to make and take the right actions and make the right decisions at the right time. Uh-oh, Shweta, you're on mute.
Hi, I'm back. So first step is identify, as Anisa mentioned. So for identify, the key thing that we really look to do here as, just to make sure that we are starting off on this process with a good grasp of what the issues are. So with that, what we look at is how does the organization look? So we perceive the organization to be just, boxes and lines, and this is the org chart. But we know, since we've all worked in large teams or large organizations, that that's not really how we connect with each other. We connect on different frequencies almost, or different dimensions with different people. Some people we may go to for advice, and other people we just commiserate over beers, or whatever the case may be. We have different relationships, and these org charts don't always reflect that, or don't at all reflect that. So how do we understand that? And because one thing that we need to one key thing is those relationships are what drive how people feel, and how people feel within the organization. So that's where our technology comes in. Our machine learning and network analytics technology looks at how people are connected to each other, maps that network out, so that we can see effectively two key things. We can understand who the key players are. So who are the big hubs who are connecting everybody that we need to, who have almost a lot of influence within the organization. And also, probably more critically, who are the people who are on the periphery or who are not connected at all that we need to bring into the fold. So the reason why we look at these two kind of parameters is because we can leverage the key hubs and the influential people to potentially bring in the people from the periphery into the fold. So that's really what we're looking at here, are to identify who these players are so that we can figure out what the next step is to engage with them. Our solution is very simple. It is completely cloud-based, online, etc. And we are really looking at-risk employees. We also can visually see team silos, as you can see over here on the left in the demo that we have going on. They're two different. This organization looked cohesive initially, but once we did the analysis, it broke off into two different silos. We can look at that and we can help managers understand that. We can also understand whether there's access problems, because everybody keeps going to the same two people. So they're overwhelmed. So they're clogging up the information pipeline. We can also see who are the people who are out on the fringe, and how do we actually bring them in. So those are kind of the really big exploratory as well as diagnostic tools that we initially engage with, so that we can make sure that the foundation for your DEI programs is solid, and it's based on data, and it's based on something that is very targeted. So now that we know how employees are impacted by D&I issues, we can see where they sit. Are they engaged? Do they not feel included, etc. We can also understand the biases present. So if all the men are connected to each other within the organization, but the women are sitting on the periphery, we can now identify bias. Same goes for other types of people within the organization, such as minorities or LGBTQ communities. We can understand how people connect and their subconscious biases really showing themselves in those networks. And then critically, we can see those people leaders who are already positioned for change. We just have to leverage them appropriately. So now that we know all of these three things, now we're ready for the next step, engage.
So engaging with our employees means communicating with them, having the conversations to understand the specific issues that they're facing and taking the steps and actions needed to resolve those issues. It's very easy to envision how we can have these kinds of conversations when we're in small single-digit companies. But how do we have these conversations at scale and with distributed workforces? And how do we make sure that the process is both continuous and on demand when needed? And that's where I want you to meet Kim. Kim is an always available chatbot that has organic conversation with employees to understand their issues and needs. She lives on your messaging channel, like Microsoft Teams, Slack, SMS, email, etc. And she creates this very interesting space for employees to give very candid feedback. because she's got this combination of anonymity plus empathy. We find that employees feel that they can talk quite openly because they're not being judged. They can be transparent with confidence. Now, there's two ways that employees can chat with Kim, and whether you're using Lean Dei or similar technology, we recommend that you have these two communication pipelines. Kim can either proactively reach out to understand employee issues on key topic areas. You see some examples here on the screen, or employees can reach out to Kim whenever they need to escalate an issue upwards. Now, for those of you in organizations that are small enough to have these conversations in person with every employee, we certainly recommend it. For those at larger organizations, Kim can help you have these conversations at scale. But the question becomes, how do we know what do we need to talk about with each group of employees? And that's where the network analysis, that's where the identify stage comes in. So the network analysis helps us to know which conversations, which areas that we need to be talking about with which employees. For example, if a network analysis identified that my Black engineers on the West Coast offices are sitting on the periphery of a social network, they're not connected to influential decision makers or to strong mentors, we know that that's a leading indicator for issues in career advancement. That could be a leading indicator for early turnover. Kim can engage with those employees and understand what their on the ground reality is, what their immediate needs are, and how do we address them. Now, to preface, we're not having reactive conversations. We're not going out to an employee and asking, are you facing discrimination? Instead, we're focusing on the underlying issues that we've identified through a network analysis, and we're focusing on resolving those issues before they escalate into very public incidents. I want to take a minute and actually show you what one of these interactions with Kim looks like. So I'm going to put myself into the role of an employee who works at a company called Acme Bank. I've talked to Kim a couple of times in the past, so I'm familiar with her. I know why it's important to chat with her, what she's going to do with what I say, etc. So I'm going to go ahead and jump into this conversation. The first question she's got for me is, do you feel like you're included in the decisions that impact your work? I'm going to say, really, just last week, I was trying to convince my manager to extend our deadline, but no one listened. Now, all my terrible spelling and grammatical issues get cleaned up by Kim in the back end. She's also using a couple forms of natural language processing to understand what the right kind of follow-up question to dive in deeper would be. So in this case, Kim wants to know, is this a trend that I'm seeing across my experience in the company? So I'm going to say, yeah, we have a weekly meeting where everyone is supposed to have input on decisions. It's really just a few people deciding everything. Now, this information is both going to be bubbled upward to the right leaders, but also Kim is using some emotional analysis in this case to kind of empathize with me that this is something that's frustrating, and then also provide me some next steps so that I can have my own empowerment in reporting this issue. In this case, I'm reporting that there's a weekly meeting that I'm not really able to speak up in. Now, Kim happens to be integrated with the learning management system that this company has and is directing me to a set of courses that might be relevant in this case. So if I click on this link, I would go into our LMS where I can see courses on increasing my influence in meetings. So we're both escalating the issues upwards for the leaders to solve, as well as, where possible, putting more power in the hands of the employee in real time. Now, the last question that Kim's got for me here is if there's anyone in management or leadership that's advocating for me that I can go to for mentorship. I'm going to say, kinda. I like Jen. She's very helpful, but hard to get on her calendar. Now, another thing I want to show you is similar to passing someone off to the right e-learning resources In this case, Kim knows that my company has a new mentorship program. And because I'm an employee that doesn't seem to have access to the right amount of counseling or mentorship, Kim was actually recommending that as something that I can check out to help me in some of those underlying issues that we identified with the network analysis. Now the last thing I want to show you here is some of the first questions that we get when people see what Kim is like, which is, what is the relationship between Kim and employees? How do you actually make sure that there's trust and transparency and openness? So a really common question that we see from employees is something like, are you really anonymous? What's happening with my data? Why is it important that I talk to you? So these are all things that Kim is able to understand and answer conversationally before coming back to her original points. The last thing that I want to show you here is what happens in scenarios where we uncover something that a bot shouldn't be dealing with. So if I was to say something like, being bullied, this is something that the bot's not really going to be able to handle. Instead, we're going to flag this as a potentially serious issue and then put it up into an escalation flow so that someone can reach out to me directly. Now, this is a sample conversation where we jumped around a little bit kind of for demo purposes, but typically from an employee's point of view, this is taking less than 2 minutes of their time, and it fits right into the workflow of how they already communicate. If I'm someone that uses Microsoft Teams at work and I'm already DMing with coworkers, my experience with Kim is going to be that she pings me just like anyone else would, and I don't have to completely break my flow. I don't have to log into another system. I just have my quick conversation and I can return to my day. We're going to jump back into the deck here. And an important point I want to make is through these conversations, we're uncovering a lot of really key insights and analytics. We're surfacing sentiment and emotional insights. We have topic insights on what are the critical areas that we need to focus on. But the important thing to remember is that analytics themselves are not the improvement. A trap that many companies fall into is they have great data gathering devices, but no process in place in order to make that data actionable and actually impact employees on the ground. That's why we've created the path to improvement. This path starts with having conversations to understand employee issues, then broadcasting back to them to say, hey, we heard you, and this is what we're going to do about those issues. Or even to say, hey, we heard you, and we need help to know what to do about what you brought up. That's where crowdsourcing comes in, actually engaging employees in the solution building process, both to kick off action planning, as well as increasing transparency of the process as a whole. And finally, this is not a one and done process. It's a continuous conversation, and we're ensuring that the needle is incrementally, but constantly moving. By continuing to check in and saying, hey, you've told me about an issue. You gave me some suggestions of what to do about it. Have we moved the needle? Is this something that is resolved or not? Now, this is a process that Kim drives for Lean DEI. At each stage with conversational AI, we're having the right conversations with the right employees and escalating insights in the right places, routing employees to the right resources. But whether you use a technology like ours or not, our recommendation is that you follow these principles. At the end of the day, the process that you want to build is that employees should feel, if I engage in the feedback process, my issues are going to be heard and they're going to be solved in a timely manner. And as a people leader, I should feel that I always know what actions to take. I never have to ask what's next when I'm moving from identification to resolution of an employee need. Now, this means that we have now talked to employees that are impacted by DE&I issues about the biases that are present in the organization, and we're delivering those insights to the people leaders that we've identified with network analysis that are already positioned to drive the most change in the organization. Now that we have this process, we need to make sure that people leaders are able to make the right decisions and take the right actions. And for that, I'm going to pass it over to Anisa.
All right, I'm unmuted now. So perfect. Thank you. So what we want to do is take the insights that have been gained from the network analysis and now the engaging with the employees, and determine what's the right size solution, right? So I want to start with the elements of a comprehensive diversity, equity, inclusion program. So we know that most organizations are absolutely going to benefit from developing a mentoring program that's specifically focused on diversity and inclusion, right? We know that you're going to want to create a diversity focused recruiting plan while also evaluating your hiring practices. Very important. You're going to want to facilitate awareness and buy-in for creating a culture of respect, which does mean awareness around unconscious bias, anti-racism, being an ally. If you see something, say something, what inclusion actually means. You're also going to want to fine-tune and review your discrimination and harassment policies. Really important. And how you can, most organizations will introduce their anti-harassment policies in an onboarding, but then other employees never go back to that training again, or it's a check the box, here's an e-learning course, right? At this time, it's really important to revisit your discrimination and harassment policies and document in writing how the values of the organization and the behaviors that are associated with D&I show up in relationship to your policies. You're going to want to inspect and improve your complaint system. As we talked about earlier, it's going to be really important to support a confidential, safe place to vocalize concerns. Kim gives you that ability using the AI technology, but if you don't have that, you're still going to want to look at yours and create a positive way for folks to give you feedback. Foster diversified business networks using cross-company network and establishing ERGs or employee resource groups. Optimally, you'll have a team of diversity and inclusivity managers and champions of change. If you want to create culture change, you're going to need folks who can support this across the organization. I've already touched on creating a safe space. You're going to want to also inspire culture change via top-down support. I'll just say this. Most executive teams believe that they already have all the awareness they need to have around diversity and inclusion initiatives. So what I would encourage most folks to do is when you're looking at your D&I strategy, use that as a means of fostering greater awareness with your leaders. Because what we've discovered is there's lots of gaps they're not aware of, and you can't be aware of what you're not aware of until you're aware of it, right? So the data and the business insights that you gain from the surveys and the engagement process, for example, with Kim, gives you the data you need to support awareness, which is essential for effective programs. Finally, Vivek has already talked about this. It's an iterative process. You're going to want to commit to continuous improvement. And to do that, it's got to be about a right size solution because no one wants to boil the ocean. So the right size solution. Not everyone's going to need a mentor. Not everyone's going to be a good mentor or a good mentee for that matter. Look at how you can take a train the trainer or a coach approach to leadership. Facilitating discussion circles when there is a pretty serious trauma in the organization, which could be simply a key leader leaving because of a racist event or because they have been the victim of some kind of marginalization or perceived slight due to being a person of color in the organization. Address it. Get an expert and do facilitated discussion circles. Not everyone will attend, not everyone will want to attend, but those who do know that you care about how they feel about the organization and that their voice matters. Look and see how you can leverage micro consulting to solve very specific vertical issues in the organization. Provide your key people leaders, your key champions of change with one-on-one support and or group support whenever possible. And finally, bare minimum, you're going to want to make sure that you cascade those D&I mission, vision, values, guiding principles, key performance indicators throughout the organization. Training can help you do that, foster that buy-in. But then look and see at a bare minimum. You want to be having at least quarterly some kind of slow drip campaign for raising awareness around bias, around structural racism, and how the values in your organization must be changed according to the organizational goals, but considering the individuals who make up the organization. So the whole process, right? How you want to solve, you want to identify what's going on, who's it impacting, how do we solve it? We want to engage. Two-way conversation. How do you feel? What can we do to improve? Are you aware of the resources that we've outlined? What are the solutions that you would like to see us implement? Finally, you want to solve that micro consulting, targeted solutions to just the groups or just the departments that need, are just the issues that will most benefit from immediate resolution. And then you want to do it again and again. And we're really looking at, most organizations take a minimum of 18 months to 2 years to really see the culture shift from one of disruption or resistance to one of buy-in and inclusivity. So this means at this point, we've listened to your employees who are most impacted by D&I issues. We've increased awareness on biases that are present in the organization, and we've provided targeted development for people leaders, empowering them to make the right actions and the right decisions at the right time with the right team members. So to recap, the 3 steps that you're going to want to implement, whether you do it leveraging technology or not, is identify, engage, and solve. And you're going to commit to a continuous cultural transformation. Let everyone know it's important to be patient with this process. So we would love to support you. One of the things that we do really well is help organizations just identify where are we in the D&I continuum. And this benchmark will help you assess how well are we actually doing and what's the next priority that we want to put our attention upon. And one thing about, Vivek, will you go back? Oh, you've got the benchmark on there. That's fine. One thing I do want to mention again that I mentioned a little bit earlier is that as a result of clients taking the benchmark and then contacting us for support around everything from strategy and strategic planning to full-scale enterprise cultural transformation, is that most diversity and inclusion managers and those who are in charge of these initiatives don't have the resources or the roadmap that they really would love to have in order to create change in their organization. So as a result of us doing this with many clients now, we've put together an accelerator program. And our next cohort is going to start right after the summer, sometime in August. Early August is the current date of launch. It's going to include group coaching and peer-to-peer support and strategy and best practices, templates, communications, problem solving, the science and the research behind how to make the case and the case that matters to your organization most, whether that's about changing our hiring or addressing cross-cultural or cross-generational differences, or in fact, dealing with systemic problems in the organization. We've created an accelerator, which is a very condensed runway of support to support you by learning best practices in a very safe place with many of the resources, tools, communications, like I said, best practices that you need to get up to speed faster and to present and create initiatives that will produce results just faster, more effectively. So when you fill out the DEI benchmark, we'll have your email. Let us know that you're interested in learning more or applying for the accelerator program, and we'll be in touch. Awesome. So to get in contact with us, don't hesitate to reach out. Consult at leandei.com or 281-845-8800. And that benchmark address again, leandei.com/DEI benchmark. So we're coming to the end here. If you have any questions, do let us know. And we appreciate you guys being here with us today. Vivek and Swetha, anything that we left out related to AI and the future of tech that we might want to share in our closing minutes?
Nothing that comes to mind particularly. I mean, I think we covered a lot of ground here. I think the key is that, for people who are just starting down this journey, it's going to be a multi-step process. And I think that's the key thing. So that's where the accelerator or our processes really come into play, is that we kind of provide you the roadmap, if you will, for for you to go on this journey, so that you're not kind of going down there and it's not overwhelming. Everybody knows that they want to do something on this, but nobody necessarily knows where to start or what to do after you start. So that's really the key pain point that we're here to help you solve.
Beautiful. Well said.
What that I'll add from a technology standpoint is understanding what you're looking for from a value standpoint, rather than starting from the coolest AI technology. Broadly speaking, especially in the field of workforce tech, AI tends to be used for the kinds of data processing that humans are not able to do, or reaching a level of scalability that human resources are not able to accomplish on their own. You see that kind of reflected in the technologies that we use as part of Lean Dei, with the network analysis doing really sophisticated analysis that would be not possible for a human team to do. And then on the scalability side, you see Kim having the kinds of conversations that would be great if a human could have every one of those conversations, but it's not possible. That's where we bring in the technology. So as you are assessing technology solutions and what role AI can play in improving your employee experiences, I would recommend start first with what is the value that you're trying to reach? What is are you trying to save someone's time? Are you trying to get new data? And then work from there into your assessments.
Fantastic. All right. Well, Vivek, Shwetha, thank you. And thank you for those of you who joined us. We look forward to meeting you and supporting you. Thank you, guys. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
Bye.